And like, I'm so new to the Rochester food scene,
Really?
like in general. So like, there's definitely a renaissance, at least since I've joined the food scene. And you're seeing like new restaurants pop up like every 3 months or so, it seems like. And
Okay.
but you can definitely tell like a lot of it's like rinse and repeat. Like it's the same owners opening up a new concept.
Okay.
So it's very much seems like there's a few families that have a handful of restaurants that are very, very successful and trustworthy.
Yeah.
So it's a very tight knit community, and I'm just beginning to scratch the surface of it through my pizza, which obviously I'm just happy to be a part of it in general.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's pretty cool to be a part of it.
Yeah. There's like a lot of restaurant groups in Rochester, right?
Yeah, there's a few of them. And again, I've only been in it 3 years, really, and two of it being a brick and mortar, one being like mobile or a food truck. But yeah, that's pretty much how it is, at least what I've seen.
Yeah. It's I mean, going to some of the accounts and then just trying to follow so many different restaurants in Rochester and try and keep up with like which ones I follow, who's still New York City. It's hard to do that because they close so often.
Yeah.
But yeah, and then like you see, part of this group, part of that group. So yeah, but the scene in Rochester, it's so much better.
Yeah.
So Syracuse had some really great restaurants, and we still do have some great restaurants. And I mean, there's, places have been open for 30, 35 years, the Italian American classics, right? Not great food by any stretch of the imagination. But they're still there. They're still busy. They're doing their thing. The things that I love in food are, and those places serve their purpose, but the things I love in food are like the people that are hyper focused on perfecting something, or just doing something interesting and unique, changing the menu up often, whatever the case is. And so Syracuse had a place called Amano, whole family owned and run, Fiacchi family. They are like, the dad is like OG hospitality through and through. And the son and essentially daughter-in-law, Alex and Lauren, they worked in Philly at Mark Vetri's restaurants.
Okay.
And they were living in Italy for like a year, studying food and pasta, and came back to Syracuse to open up this place with their dad. And so they were the two main chefs, made all the pasta shapes made from scratch by hand.
Amazing.
Focaccia, best focaccia I've ever had. The younger son, Noah, is the best pizza maker in Syracuse. And he does, your typical thin, crispy, wood-fired pizza. And he does a really great job. And Alex and Lauren just, kind of couldn't take it anymore. Like, their thing was it's not an Italian-American restaurant. It's an Italian restaurant. So there's no lasagna. There's no chicken riggies. There's no chicken parm. Like, you're not going to find that anywhere on this menu ever.
That is the Western Central New York,
Yes.
like quintessential Italian restaurant.
Right. Yeah. And so they got some shit for it, but eventually they just wanted to get out. So but the father and the son kept it. They just rebranded it. And they still have phenomenal pizza every Thursday. They do gnocchi. We had a high-end restaurant, St. Urban. Like, I'd put it up against any restaurant anywhere. Really fine dining. They moved to New York City. There's somebody else. So now it's just Eden. Eden's like the last one.
Yeah.
It's the last of its kind.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I definitely look forward to visiting that
Yeah.
restaurant for sure.
Phenomenal place. Really, really cool. But Rich goes down to New York City a bit, and so we were talking about that, and that's kind of what led us to talking about you was, the places that are like hyper focused, do one thing really, really, really well. So when you first started and you were doing mobile and you had just kind of like the rock boxes, were you just doing like the one typical pizza? I mean, you weren't doing like the squares and all that.
So it started out with Neapolitan style pizza because the rock box oven, I mean, it's like an incinerator. I mean, it's at its lowest temp, it's like 700 degrees Fahrenheit, which does not bode well really for any style of pizza other than like a high temp wood fired or Neapolitan.
Okay.
And I chose to go to a route of Neapolitan to start, just because the rapid turnaround, 90 seconds or less, that pizza's done.
Yeah.
Simple ingredient, small pizza. And then I started playing around with Detroit style pizza, and I figured out a way to make it in the rock box, but it was a pain in the ass. And we only did it like once a month, and I invested in the pans. So really, when I started out, it was like Neapolitan, and then I introduced Detroit style pizza. But Detroit style was just a novelty. Once a month, we had a pop up, and we tried to change that location. And that one, we'd sell out of 75 Detroits whenever we would do those pop ups at those different places. And I would post that venue that we were doing it for that month, so like people can circle their calendars. And then people just fell in love with that Detroit style pizza.
Yeah.
But yeah, the mobile thing is just an absolute hustle and grind. And happy to say that I retired the truck this past year just to focus on the restaurant.
Yeah. It's a really cool looking truck for sure.
Yeah, for sure.
And I've used you as the example for people for the last 2 years, 3 years, just having seen the photos of your mobile setup, bringing the rock boxes with you. I'm like, listen, it can be done. You don't need a $50,000 oven.
Yeah.
You can get away with doing stuff and still producing great food.
Yeah, man. And that was a big piece of it too, to like the overhead expense of like getting a trailer, fitted with a pizza oven, or getting, your typical workhorse box truck.
Yeah.
Those are so much money.
Yeah.
Quite the investment. And it's like, you're talking 80 to 120K, pre-pandemic. Now I can't even imagine what they would cost, but I did it for a fraction of the price. And ultimately it led me to where I am now.
Yeah.
So
That's awesome.
yeah, pretty wild.
So how did you get into food and into, eventually into pizza?
So food, I come from Hispanic background. My parents are both from Puerto Rico. Every weekend, growing up in New York City, we were going to relatives' houses. Everyone brought a dish to pass, or whoever's house we were going to, there was food being made. So grew up around it. So very much deep rooted in my DNA. And it's something that I found out that I really enjoyed when I started working in food. At the age of 14, I got a job in a banquet house. And this place did anything from, proms to weddings to, they had a tavern attached. They had wing nights. So like it was a jack of all trades. And I was a dishwasher there at the age of 14. And then after a year being a dishwasher, they asked me if I was interested in starting to learn to cook. And then from there, at the age of 15 was when I actually first made pizza. And this wasn't like real artisan hand-tossed pizza. I mean, they were getting frozen dough from DePaulo that was being slacked off and stretching it out on a pan that was sprayed with Pam and then tossed into a gas deck oven,
Yeah.
But in any event, that's where I first learned how to make pizza. And then just from that age on, I worked in multiple facets within the restaurant industry, from, locally owned to corporate to private. Went to school for food service management. So always been in food. And then my entire career, it's so funny how things work, but like you work for so many different people and you have so many different, bosses, supervisors. And the ones that were the small business owners were always the ones who were talking me out of starting my own business or getting into the restaurant. So like, don't do it. You live it. It's 7 days a week. 24 hours a day, 365 days out of the year. So really just got discouraged from doing that. So I'm like, how can I still work in the hospitality industry and have work-life balance? So going from like restaurants and nights and weekends to working for Wegmans for a few years and prepared foods as a prepared foods manager. And then from there, I worked at RIT managing a dining hall on campus.
Okay.
And that was a job that was like Monday through Friday, 9 to 5. When school wasn't in session, I had all this free time to do what I wanted. And that ultimately led me to start doing these pop-ups, pizza pop-ups. So I'd been an avid at-home pizza maker throughout my entire life and work career. And there was just, like I said, just all these different jobs that I had throughout the industry, and it's funny to reflect back on all of them, but all of them had pizza in some way, shape, or form on their menu. So like subconsciously, maybe I just loved pizza the entire time that I was working at these restaurants, but never actively, seeking to work in pizza. But the bulk of my pizza experience was in a pizza restaurant that I worked through high school and into my early years of college, and I did my co-op with that pizzeria owner. And honestly, all the pizza experience I got in my career was what not to do when it comes to making pizza, which I think is almost more valuable in the sense of my approach to pizza now.
Was that what not to do because you saw them and like they knew they were making mistakes, or was it what not to do because you were eating it and saying, I know that there's something better out there?
No, it was more of like I think now that I've been making pizza professionally for almost 3 or 4 years now, reflecting back, like during a dinner service on a Friday night, we're making dough, pulling that dough out of a mixer, shaping it, proofing it, and using it an hour after it came out of the mixer, like shit like that.
Yeah.
Just because they want to move units, they don't want to tell customers no, they just want to, sell 400 or 500 pizzas in a night, stuff like using low-end tomato products or low-end cheese to increase profits, like shit like that.
Yeah.
But like, again, to each his own. If that's what
Right.
you want to do, that's what you want to do. But like for me, I definitely want to make an impact on the food community through my pizza, but using the highest quality ingredients.
Yeah, for sure. There was a place, I forget the name of the restaurant. I saw it. It's in New York City. It's a pizza shop. And they interviewed the owner, and they were like, so they make their everything every like 4 hours. I forget who it was. They make the dough, the sauce, everything every 4 hours. No matter if they need it or not, they'll dump it. And he said, the reason why he said it was the customer should be getting the freshest ingredients, like the freshest product. And I was like, as I'm listening to that, and I'm no expert when it comes to pizza and dough fermentation, but I was like, I don't think that's how it works. I don't think
It is definitely not how it works. And I just am like trying to piece that together in my mind, like what that kitchen looks like, you know, from like a production standpoint.
Right.
But yeah, you hit the nail on the head. Like big thing with bread making and dough making in general is fermentation.
Right.
And that wasn't something that I even knew of in regard to pizza. I thought fermentation was, wine and spirits and, fermenting vegetables and things like that.
Yeah.
Never thought about fermenting bread because it's directly correlated with digestibility and pH level and trying to get that dough as close to the pH level of your digestive tract so that it's easier for you to consume. And there's a lot of places that focus like that. You have to find them. But there's a lot more places that do not focus on that. So like for me, it's like high quality product that's easily digestible where my customers can eat it and not feel like shit, an hour later. So
Yeah. I've been getting really into Detroit pizza.
Yeah.
Just because it's, I got into, I don't know, I was doing it in the oven on a pizza steel during the pandemic. So not like a wood fired, but not a New York style either, but like thin, crispier. And so, but we have a small kitchen, and my wife would murder me if I started making pizza like that again and getting flour all over the place. So Detroit was the way to go.
yeah.
And it's been a lot of fun,
Yeah, man.
trying to figure out, like this past Friday night, I made one and I completely botched it. I used this cheeky monkey sauce on it, which is really thin. I should have thickened it up. Way too much cheese, and then the topping choice was just absolute garbage. And then I also realized, like, all right, I probably have to broil this at home for a minute or two before for the toppings before I really pull it out.
Yeah.
But it is pretty interesting to go through a couple things. One, making a dough and then not realizing, like having to wait 2 or 3 days to figure out what you screwed up.
Yeah.
Yep. It's kind of tough.
It's so frustrating, man. It really is. Like the dough itself. So like our restaurant, we carry 9 different flours in house for all the different styles of pizza. So like my New York
have
style.
4 styles, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
So, well, we have actually 10 different types of flours, but so like the New York style is a 4-flour blend, and it's a blend of different flours that I've decided that I really like the characteristics that are the outcome of the blend of these flours. And then our Detroit styles 3-flour blend. Our our Neapolitan style, like for the truck when we're doing that, that's a 2-flour blend. And then we have a gluten-free flour, so that's 1 flour there. And then our Sicilian and Grandma, another 3-flour blend. And our focaccia is a singular flour for that one. But they're all different because like it can be overwhelming with flour specifically because there's so many options out there. They're all going to lead to different colors, textures, flavors, and ultimately it boils down to what characteristics you like. And like when I was starting this journey, I was trying all sorts of different flours, you know, and started with one like style of pizza, and like, you know, like for Detroit style, you know, 12.5 protein content is ideal for like a pan pizza like that. So finding a bread flour with that protein content, and maybe it's trying, you know, 4 different brands of bread flour and seeing the textures and colors and flavors that you like out of those flours, and then from there tweak them.
Yeah.
And that's really like even to this day, you know, I've developed, like I said, all these different flours or like blends and these dough recipes for these pizzas, and they're not authentic to the style of pizza, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Like it's my version of what I interpret Detroit style to be. Have I been to Detroit? No, I've had Detroit in different cities from different restaurants, so I got the base knowledge of it. But like all at the end of the day, I think for chefs, like it's always like our interpretation of what that's supposed to be. But yeah, the dough is the toughest part because like I make New York style dough 4 days a week, 3 days a week for 4 days of service. And every single batch is different, which I notice little subtle like nuances to the things. And like, even when you bake them, when they're slightly different, could be from like over mixing, or maybe the scale wasn't quite tiered. So like, you know, it may have had just a tad more flour or a little less water, or you incorporated the salt too early on. Like little things like that will completely impact, you know, the results, in addition to temperature and humidity.
Yeah.
And like those are probably the 2 biggest variables that will affect the outcome of dough. So like you have to adjust your yeast percentages or sourdough percentages based off Mother Nature, you know. So we have thermometers throughout the kitchen. I check the weather every single day.
Wow.
You know, and like I just had heat and AC installed in the restaurant. I went 2 years without it. So like that was an absolute nightmare because it was so goddamn hot in the restaurant in the summer, and then freezing cold in the winter. So like that was one thing, like being able to pull dough in an adequate amount of time for it to proof.
Yeah.
So like that was a learning curve. But like the dough itself is like obviously the most important piece to pizza making because it's the canvas, you know, and it's the base to what you're gonna top it with.
Yeah.
So like always striving to find that perfect batch of dough, and you know it does happen,
Right.
but it's hard to do it consistently at a high level, if that makes sense.
Oh yeah, I'm sure. I could. So my there's a small old, been around for like 40 years, wholesaler here in Syracuse called Lorenzo's, and they were primarily known as like a seafood spot. You know, they still are. They bring in a ton of fresh and frozen seafood, all different types. So, long story short, they were just purchased by this guy. My father is like kind of like their head of sales there, and there's only one guy in sales, so it's him. But it's that small of a, you know, wholesaler.
Yeah.
And so they hired me to help them do some of their marketing and social media. And the guy that owns the company that just bought it is kind of an odd bird, but he owns this massive chemical company in the Northeast.
Okay.
And actually, his main office is just 2 doors down from here. But he's 70 years old. He's actually 71. He's the same age as my dad. And for some reason, he wants to create this food division of his chemical company. And his thought is, one of the reasons why he wants to do it is he figures if he's got like an 18-wheeler truck driver that's on the road 5 days a week who wants to get off the road and come home, and he doesn't have a job for him on the chemical side, he could say, do you want to go work in one of the restaurants or the wholesaler? Or maybe as a chef who wants to get out of the kitchen, he can bring him into the chemical company. So the guys bought two.
That is an interesting approach.
I know, it's very. So he bought this wholesaler. He bought another wholesaler that like really specialized in just chicken wings in the area. Small. They do like $700,000 a year at that place. He's about to buy two other seafood distributors.
Jesus.
He's planning on having like 3 or 4 different restaurants.
Okay.
There's a pizza shop in Auburn who he's looking at buying them right now. And so my dad, like I've been sharing the pictures on Facebook, and so my dad calls me the other day or last week, and he's like, "Hey, Mom said that you've been cooking a lot of Detroit pizza at home." I was like, "Yeah, why?" He was like, "Do you have a recipe down?" I was like, "Not really." He was like, "Well, get one because we might be buying a pizza shop, here at Lorenzo's, and we might need you to." I was like, "You're out of your mind. That's not how it works."
That is absolutely insane.
My father, he doesn't, so that was a little crude, but that's kind of my dad. My dad's like, but my dad he's restaurants his entire life. He was a part owner and ran the first franchised Pizzeria Uno in the country.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it was so the first one they franchised out was in Fairfax or Washington, D.C. area.
Okay.
And he still has like all the pans from back then, like those deep dish pans. Yeah,
That's nuts.
Has their original recipe.
I'm sure he's excited about that, though. Like getting back into pizza or the pizza shop being acquired.
Yeah, he's too, he's too old now at this point. He doesn't know it yet, but he is to like cook, like get on the line or anything like that. But yeah, he's definitely, excited. It's been the last 2 years, I'd say, 2.5 years. I talk to my dad every day about restaurant stuff because I'm running around, he's running around. And, it's funny. I called him one day and I was like, there was something, not that I grew up sheltered, but I didn't grow up in like the restaurant industry, like hardcore.
Yeah.
And I was somewhere and somebody was like doing coke or couldn't pay for something because they did too much coke. I don't know. It was like one of those typical restaurant coke stories.
Yep.
Right?
There's always the typical restaurant coke story. I've definitely seen those firsthand.
So I called my dad and I was telling him the story, and he just starts laughing. He's like, "Nothing has changed in this industry, and 50 years that he's been in it.
Yep.
Everything is still the same.
Yep.
Somebody with a drug or a gambling problem is, cooking or owns the place or whatever the hell."
100%, man. 100%. I worked for one pizzeria owner, and he was definitely a gambler. He enjoyed the fruits of his labor.
Right.
So be it.
Yeah.
But eventually lost the business because of it. And it's like,
crazy.
God damn, man.
It's wild.
It is. It is.
Yeah. So, I mean, well, I could talk about dough and all that kind of stuff, and I want to get back to it because I do have questions. What's it been like for you for the last 3 years? But and even 2 with the brick and mortar owning the place. Has it been more than what you thought it would be? Has it been less? Or can you find that balance?
Dude, it is so much fucking work. Everyone warns you.
Yeah.
Like, it's going to be a lot of work. Like, I know. And then you're in it, you're like, oh my God, this is way more work than they said it was going to be. But yeah, we've had an unplanned, unconventional path to where we are. And the trajectory has been up. I've hit sales goals for 3 straight years, and I've proven a concept within my city, and it's been for the most part, I mean, a lot of highs. There's obviously some lows.
Yeah.
This year, I would say I faced the most challenges financially in my 3rd year than I have other years prior.
Wow.
From the standpoint of like rising cost of goods, equipment breaking, wage expectations, like all that stuff, on top of, life.
Yeah.
So trying to navigate and find work-life balance, and I do. I mean, I shut down 5 full weeks out of the year to deep clean the restaurant, give the team an option. Listen, you guys can work or you can have off. If we're working, we're deep cleaning this restaurant.
Yeah.
Usually half the staff's like, peace, I'll take off. The other half's like, I want to still work. I want to make some money. and contribute to deep cleaning, because that's equally as important. And all of us need a recharge.
Yeah.
So like Memorial Day week, we shut down. Independence Day week, we shut down. Labor Day week, we shut down. Thanksgiving Eve, we stay open, but the days following Thanksgiving, we shut down. Depending on where Christmas and New Year falls, we shut down. So it ends up being like 4 to 5 weeks out of the year that we shut down. But that allows me to be able to travel with my wife and enjoy that time and really take advantage of the time off together in those instances, because we don't really get to see much of one another during, the hustle and bustle of my weekly schedule on top of her weekly schedule. So,
Is she in the food industry?
she is not. She's in aviation.
Okay.
So she manages a few corporate jets for a company based out of Rochester. So, but she helped me out a tremendous amount when we first got running. So she worked in aviation. Everything was grounded during the pandemic, and early on, like everything was like the state mandates. No indoor dining, or 25%, or 100% socially distance outside, and we hit the market at the right time because a lot of these breweries, cideries, and wineries were looking for food, because a lot of those breweries, cideries, and wineries needed to offer like chips or have a food vendor on site, and we just hit it at the right time. So like May 2020 through pretty much like November of 2020, she helped me because there was no travel. So she really helped me out getting it going.
Yeah.
And then, once things open back up, she's like, bye-bye, all on you now. And now she just helps me from behind the scenes, with whether it be the website, social media, managing, reconciling my QuickBooks, which is all just as helpful. And as the business has grown, like I have less and less time to be able to commit to those things. So it's been super, super, super like beneficial to have a partner involved in this entire thing.
Oh, I'm sure.
I always tell everyone she's the brains of the operation for sure. I'll pitch an idea to her and she's quick to challenge it, which I appreciate, because someone's got to check me every now and then, right?
Yeah, for sure.
But yeah, and then, the growth has been, we went from a pop-up concept to a food truck concept in less than a calendar year. And then in the next year of 2020, I signed a lease for a brick and mortar. And then at the end of 2022, I bought that building that my restaurant's in. So like,
Oh, wow.
year after year, significant growth. Like, again, but I'm like in this like fucking business cyclone of like all these things are happening, positives, negatives, and this business is coming together, and here I am in the middle of it, unsure of what I'm doing. And I think a lot of business owners feel that way most of the time. It's just really a lot of problem solving and finding ways to be creative, innovative, and innovative. So yeah, in the middle of this wild, like, I don't know what it is, entrepreneurial, storm.
Right.
And all the pieces end up falling into place one way or another. But it's been really, really great. It's a labor of love.
Yeah.
And like, I'm fully aware that our pizza concept, or my pizza concept, is not the average pizza concept. We pride ourselves on quality over quantity. That's been the model since the very beginning. When I first started, it was like 50 pizzas. That's all I'm doing because that's all I can handle. That's all these ovens can handle without the quality of the product being, affected in a negative way. And then when I got more ovens, it's like, all right, now I have more ovens. I can handle this volume. And that's it, without, again, the staff not being able to handle it, or the equipment, or I'm not able to source, the ingredients. And then from there, just kept that same model, and it's worked for us. When we focus on producing the highest quality products, sourcing the highest quality ingredients, we've proven that it leads to an exceptional experience in addition to quality of service. Like, those two things go hand in hand.
Yeah.
I mean, you could have the best food out there, horrible service, people aren't coming back. Mediocre food, excellent service, people are more likely to come back. If you can nail both of those at a high level, people are retained as customers for the lifetime, and even hopefully their kids too, if it's the business becomes generational,
For sure.
So like that's been, I don't know, a huge motivator for me.
Yeah. Well, so where do you get the, it seems like you're pretty active, even though I saw on Instagram story, you were up at the shop at like 4 a.m. this morning.
Yeah.
So even though you're incredibly active in that regard of like the production and everything and hands-on, where do you get the, your approach to business and like understanding to buy the building or to grow or expand or do all those things? Is it just like actively learning and training yourself and trying to figure out where the education is?
Yeah. So, I think I feel like most business owners' goal is to own their own space, and not have to rent out the space. And this opportunity, I wasn't actively looking to buy the space, and it just so happened that the landlord was looking to acquire another space and needed to sell that building, and he saw a business that had a vested interest, an established business in that community, and that was a successful one nonetheless. So he approached me to say, "Hey, you ready to purchase this?" And I'm like, I can try. But yeah, I think, weighing the pros and cons, and I think it made a lot of sense for my wife and I to attempt to purchase it. And if it didn't, so be it. But like my original plan was like, I wanted to run the mobile business like one more year before even entertaining getting into a brick and mortar space. And even getting into that brick and mortar space, I ended up doing like a year sooner. And then same thing with purchasing. Like I was going to start looking into like what the cost of getting into my own commercial space or building a space from the ground up, like getting an idea of what that looks like. And again, like it just, all of this stuff is like happening way faster than I can process. But at the end of the day, it made a lot of sense because, there's 2 commercial units, 2 residential. So like the ability now to create a separate business and have my restaurant business pay my other business, it's more, income at the end of the day. But it's also managing an entire separate business. So here I am still learning how to operate one business that's a restaurant and service business. Now I'm managing and learning how to operate a residential business.
Yeah.
So from that standpoint, it's like you should always want to grow, as a business. And for me, I'm big on taking advantage of opportunities. The opportunity to start this food truck came up. I took advantage of it. Then from there, the opportunity to get into a brick and mortar space, took advantage of it. I may have not been ready for it, but I was like, all right, let's challenge myself again.
Yeah.
And then just continuing to challenge myself to, step outside that comfort zone and keep opening up that hole of debt. But all in all, it just made a lot of sense because the whole piece of like now that I'm able to put some of the commercial properties expenses in the restaurant's name, like there's a lot of pros and cons to being able to do that and vice versa.
Yeah.
So yeah, now I'm there and I'm gonna be there for a minute, I think. But
20
yeah.
to 30 years.
Yeah, man. Yeah. So, but that was a whole learning experience in its own. Like I purchased a home back in, I think we're about to be 9 years now in that house, or 10 years now. So when I was like 22 or 23, I purchased my first home, and then from there, like figuring out like purchasing a commercial property is way fucking different than purchasing a residential. And like there was all these different things throughout that entire process, and it was like a 6-month long process before we were able to close on the building. But we had to lift up the cushions on the couch, grab every penny underneath that thing to be able to close on that property, and we did. But like throughout that entire thing, there was all these different little things that we had to, like little roadblocks and hurdles, if you want to call it that, along the way. But like one of the big things was we should never been able to close on the property because the previous landlord is supposed to provide heat to all the tenants in the building. I was the only tenant without it. So like we purchased the property, and then now that expense has been put on me.
Man.
So like technically the deal should have it made it through the underwriters, the lawyers, everyone, and then now I have to fork out the thousands of dollars for that. But you're constantly learning, man.
Yeah, for sure.
And those experiences through that process are going to help me. And who knows whether it's the next business venture or a restaurant or a commercial property, whatever the case may be.
Yeah. Yeah, that's wild. I mean, that's the dream for any restaurant
Yeah.
is to own the building, own the dirt. I don't know if that's the dream, but it's definitely
It's helpful.
Yeah, for sure.
For sure.
Yeah.
I mean, that rent being paid out annually that you're essentially just losing,
Yeah.
and if you own it, you're paying for that property, building that equity.
Right.
It's just beneficial on so many different levels.
Yeah, that's huge. So what made you want to go from the mobile setup to the brick and mortar? Was it just kind of the hassle of like having to keep everything so small with the mobile? Was it just opportunity, like be able to make more money?
So really it was the customers.
Okay.
Honestly, like people were just sick of chasing me all around Monroe County, like I'd be like I had a residency at Three Heads Brewing, which was it's like 5 minutes from my pizzeria.
Yeah.
But like that was the one location where we saw growth every single time we did an event there. But like that was our residency and we did it twice a month at that venue. But all the other ones we'd be, over in Fairport and then over in Victor and then over in Livingston County and then Monroe County. And there's people who were chasing us around, but they're only going to do it so much, So taking that feedback where people are like, when are you going to open a brick and mortar?
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm having fun with this food truck, And I thought my plan was to just do the food truck in addition to my job at RIT. Like I was Monday through Friday benefits. Like I could easily grow with RIT as that campus is growing. I was managing the second largest dining hall on the campus and had all this time off and, the Roth IRA and, all these different things and benefits. And those are all gone now. But at that point, I had that in addition to work-life balance, and I traded it all for my own pizza business. But, like, it was just like I don't know, all these different, like, experiences and unplanned, like, things that occurred that led me to where I am. So, like, if I could have it my way and there wasn't a pandemic, I'd probably still be doing the truck in the summer and the spring, just for a little extra cash. And I had the opportunity to be like, I don't want to do anything this weekend. Take the weekend off.
Right.
Not so much anymore.
Yeah.
But yeah, it just was one of those things where listening to the customer and then figuring out like where would we have the most success, and like being that we were at Three Heads twice a month for almost 2 straight years and going from like 80 pizzas a week there to 150 to 160 a week or in an evening there. That's where I was like, all right, I know that this place is nearby where my pizzeria should be.
Yeah.
And then one of those things was on Culver, I would always drive by that building to go to Three Heads because I live in Irondequoit and essentially would take Culver directly to Atlantic and then Atlantic to where Three Heads is. So I would drive by that space every time I went to Three Heads. And there was always, like, every once in a while I'd see that building, which was a former pizzeria and convenience store, but it had been vacant for almost 6 years. Wow. 7 years. And I would drive by and it was called Bubba and Fifi's Pizza. And I would drive by, I'm like, what if? And then it's just one of those weird things. Like I was making pizza at home, like some other styles of pizza. And like, fortunate for me, I had a few friends that lived nearby. So whenever I'd make a new style pizza, I'd run it over to them. And then I ran into a friend and he's like, hey, dude, there's this former pizzeria here in the city that's up for lease. You should look into it. Shows me it. I'm like, I think this is the place on Culver. And then surely enough, it was, which was a 5-minute drive from Three Heads. And I reached out to the landlord looking to lease the space out that next Monday. So it was like a Saturday when I reached out to him. That next Monday, I was seeing the space. And then by the end of that month, signed a lease to get into that space. Wow. So it was like never planned. Like I knew at some point I was going to get into it. My idea was like a year, like one more year of mobile. And then I essentially did mobile and the brick and mortar my first year, which was challenging in its own. But we only did the mobile and the brick and mortar, but the brick and mortar was only dinners only.
Okay.
And I limited the amount of events I did to one on the weekend. So like if I was going to be stepping away, it was going to be, you know, a Friday or a Saturday or a Saturday or a Sunday. And like the restaurant was closed Sunday anyhow. So it was really me being away from the restaurant. I was forced to be away because I didn't know like
Right.
this pizzeria could tank, and how am I supposed to generate money if this you know, food truck, you know?
Yeah, for
and
sure.
the business was so young, so I had no idea. But it all ended up working out one way or another.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was,
That's wild.
yeah, it all it's everything. I set a goal, achieve that goal, and then set another goal, but I'd have to achieve that goal a year sooner than I had originally planned, if that makes sense.
Yeah, for sure.
So very rapid growth. I'm very fortunate.
Yeah.
Blessed to have the support and love from the community, the trust from the community, the trust from my team.
Yeah.
You know, I've been very lucky throughout this entire process to pretty much retain almost the 10 employees that I hired for the brick and mortar 2 years ago, aside from like 3.
Yeah.
You know, and it's like 3 that I've had to replace every 3-4 months, 5 months, give or take. But yeah, this past September, October timeframe, I lost 2 people who were going to be going from part-time to full-time, and ended up not working out, and I lost them. And then it's been a mad dash trying to get people or quality candidates in to be an employee. And that's like the most recent struggles was trying to get people in. But like I've interviewed probably, you know, 24 candidates, and I've not gotten great candidates.
Yeah.
And I'm not just going to hire anyone. I'm very particular, you know, looking for the right energy, the right mindset, and just an overall good fit for the team.
Yeah. Yeah, that's interesting because it sounds like it's kind of a similar issue in Syracuse. Restaurants are still having a hard time finding, you know, great staff. You wind up, you know, settling and dealing with somebody that really isn't the perfect fit, you know, out there. I think one of the challenges that a lot of restaurants face right now is just being able to afford staff. You know, because around here, like if you're at a diner, if you're like at a breakfast spot or something like that, you're making $17 to $20 an hour. You know, if you're a dishwasher, if you're a line cook, you know, whatever the case is, and upper management, even in these independent places, are getting, you know, $60 to $75, $80,000 a year salary, and so it's tough. You know, it really is. Like, I mean, I don't know of anybody that, you know, if you're not willing to like really commit your entire life to the restaurant and be there, then you really shouldn't be in the industry, you know? I've got a friend who wants me to purchase his diner. It's really It's a very successful diner. Been here for 40 years. Wow. And it's just, I'm like, dude, I can't commit. Like I've got a 14-month at home. I can't commit that much time to it.
Yeah, man.
You know?
It's crazy to think about. But yeah, like the wage expectations, I mean, I had someone who applied for a part-time role, looking for 15 hours a week. Person asked for $30 an hour.
Holy.
I'm like, I'd love to make $30 an hour, you know?
Yeah.
But like wage expectations are just absurd. And I think like too, like, and this is just my own opinion, but like the restaurant scene is growing so rapidly in Rochester, and a lot of people are just moving from one opportunity to the next opportunity. And it may be like the next opportunity is providing more incentive. You know, they might have a higher starting salary than the next. And you're seeing a lot of people move from one place to the next in a 3-month, 6-month time frame to just collect a bigger check, or, you know, it may be a promotion in a way, going from a sous to an executive, but there's so many different people. But all in all, you know, we're talking, I just had a meeting with my CPA last week, and one of the biggest things that stood out on our P&L was wages. Wages were up 100% over last year. So like more and more people asking for more and more money. And like, granted, like I'm happy to pay competitively.
Yeah.
And, you know, if you come in with a willingness to learn and you want to give 110%, I am all for compensating off of the effort that you put in.
Yeah.
But yeah, 100%. Granted, I did do a bit of traveling this year. I was away for almost 8 weeks away from my restaurant, and the restaurant stood open. So like that was a big one.
Yeah, that's awesome.
To be able to have a team strong enough to be able to operate that restaurant probably even better with me not there, or smoother,
Yeah.
or less stressful,
Yeah, for sure.
if that makes sense.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, like very grateful to have the team that I have had these last 2 years. But yeah, it's nuts, man. And like the other thing too is we're seeing like, yeah, you might be making $20 an hour or $22 an hour, but like tipping, that's something that when I was in restaurants,
Oh, yeah.
a counter service takeout place, it was very minimal.
Yeah.
You're talking maybe $20 and pooled tips at the end of the week if you were lucky.
Yeah.
Now it's insane, like $1,000, $1,200 in pooled tips at the end of the week. And like
wild.
that, it's great, to provide as an incentive for
sure.
your team, instead of now that bumps it an extra $5 or $6 an hour.
Yeah.
So trying to make your team aware of that too.
Yeah. Yeah, there's so many issues in the restaurant industry nowadays that I feel like it's more of a, like, social media has connected so many different things that like you see what other restaurants are doing, whether it's good or bad, and it's like, if you're paying somebody, which listen, everybody deserves to make a living wage without question, but the reality of the situation is if things continue to increase at the rate that they have over the last 2 to 3 years, here in upstate New York especially, restaurants are going to start having to price themselves out of the realm of affordability for, like, I started making pizza at home the last month because my wife and I would order every Friday night. We would get pizza for dinner, and it would just got to a point where it's like, why am I paying so much? We got pizza and wings 2 weeks ago. It was $60 delivered for an order of wings and a large pizza.
Yeah, man.
And I was like, we can't, like, who can afford to do that?
Inflation is just absurd right now.
crazy.
But like I'm paying like $6 for a quarter cream. We go through probably 10 quarts of cream in a week. Like just cream, and then like your things like the big ticket items being your cheese, your pepperoni, all that stuff is like up 50% over last year.
Wow.
So like I've had to make price increases like 3 times out of the year.
Yeah.
I've had customers be like, "Yo, man, this is up $5, or from the last time," and it's just like, I got to do what I got to do because I can't pay my employees without raising these prices. I can't pay for my cost of goods without raising these prices. And granted, like for us, our price point is much higher than our competitors because I'm going to the market to source whole chickens for our chicken sausage that we break the chickens down in house. I'm going to these local farms for pretty much my animal proteins, the pork, the beef, the chicken, all from local pastures, organic, and then produce too, like sourcing the highest quality produce. I mean, shallots are fucking $5. What is it? $5 a quart, which is less than a pound. So if you price it out per pound, it's way more than that, and then garlic too that I'm getting is $20 per pound. So like it's all really, really expensive, but like it's the highest quality products that I can get my hands on. And like my approach to my restaurant too is like, if someone's coming over to my house for dinner and they ask me, where'd you get that meat from? I want to be able to speak about it. Where'd you get that produce from? I want to be able to speak about it, So like a big thing that I've been trying to educate our community is like, we are sourcing as much produce and all the animal proteins, aside from like our aged mozzarella and pepperoni, from local farms, so like that increases our price point. But you can't compare our pizza to any other pizzeria in the city. But again, like there's that saying, you get what you pay for.
For sure.
But like there's so many different factors, the rising cost of, like your rent and all that. Luckily for me, I now own the place, but
you can charge yourself whatever you want.
But like, I mean, it's tough. It really is. And like, I've tried to come up with ways to incentivize the customers that are continuing to choose us. We launched a loyalty program a year ago. And essentially what it is like there's 3 tiers. There's a bronze, a silver, and a gold tier. And you pay an annual membership fee that can be used for a discount on 1 order per day for a whole calendar year. So, bronze is 10, silver 20, and then gold 30%. And
Off your order?
Off the order. But they pay that membership fee up front, and that membership fee comes right to the restaurant. So if you're spending over $500 a year in food, that's when you would recoup essentially your initial investment on that membership. And that's helped us wondrous. I launched it during the holiday season last year, and I'm seeing a lot of those customers renew those memberships, a lot of new memberships being purchased. We also give away, gift cards, opportunity for free pizzas, things like that. So figuring out ways to, lift that burden of, wow, your food's so expensive.
Yeah.
But also, in addition to that, educating our customers as to why our food's so expensive.
Yeah. So I'm fascinated. I'm going to ask you a bunch of questions about that program.
Yeah, no problem.
I'm fascinated by that, especially recently, like, the last year of social media for Eat Local New York. This past year, I was trying to put out like a video a day and grew by like, 14,000 followers in the year, and putting out so much content. And then I don't know if you experienced this, but in like September, late August, early September of this year, especially on Instagram and a little bit on TikTok, video views just plummeted. And there was really no reason why. Nobody had an answer. It was just like, hey, videos just aren't working. Instagram Reels aren't working as much as they used to. And that led me down the path of like mass education in algorithms and social media and content and what works and what doesn't and all that kind of stuff. And still trying to figure that out. One of the things I'm learning is, or that I've come to, I've concluded is that like, you can't just post unless you're just an exceptional, you're the belle of the ball at the moment. You can't just post a drip shot, a cheese pull every single day and expect, to get hundreds of customers in your door.
Yeah.
Right. It's all about just mass awareness. If you can be seen by 100,000 people, you can convert a few more than if you were seen by 10,000 people. Right. But you have to create, a sense of community. You have to create relationships with your followers on your social media account.
You have to be present.
Right.
For sure. And you can tell which accounts are like operated by AI.
Yeah.
Or outsourced by a company or something along the lines. You can usually tell what's an authentic person that's interacting with the owner.
For sure.
So like for me, that's one of the pieces that I do enjoy is that engagement. And like when people get excited about, whether it's a focaccia sandwich that we're doing that week or a specialty pizza or whatever.
Yeah.
I enjoy that interaction, but like social media has like been one of the most difficult things to truly get a grasp on because it's changed so much in 3 years, and like trying to keep up with the trends and like you said, I know 100% what you're talking about, where it's like, keep feeding the beast. The more you feed the beast, the more people are going to see your stuff. So like I went through a point where I was posting literally 5 times a week, like every other day posting something. And then I started to see a significant spike in my growth. And then, also too, like, cause I have my personal page, Pizza with Perez, and then Peels on Wheels Pizza, like the type of content being pushed out on both of those.
Yeah.
Whereas like one needs to be more of like your food porn, run and gun, people like seeing stuff built, while the other one wants to be more of like showing who I am, being authentic to who I am, showing a taste of what my life is outside of the restaurant, but also like long format recipes, videos, things like that. So like understanding it that way, but like, dude, social media at this point, it's a fucking slot machine, like,
I mean, look at this. Look at the video I posted.
Dude, that was fucking wild.
Yeah.
Like, just like, it's a small 8-second snippet, and it probably was something like maybe during your podcast, you thought, all right, this might be a cool snippet to put out there, or it was just kind of on a whim. But that's how it is. Like, there could be like someone, exhausting so much money and effort trying to produce excellent
Yeah.
content, and you don't see that return
Right.
from like an engagement standpoint. And then there's days where you take something that's, pull out your phone, record something quick and throw it out there, and then it goes viral. It's like,
Yeah.
what the hell?
Yeah.
You know?
It's still, that's why like I was it still surprises me that I can put something out there that people are going to watch and then go take an action with. And that's why I started Eat Local New York in the first place. Was met a restaurant owner who loved how to cook, knew how to do nothing else, got a bunch of debt, opened a restaurant, 6 months later was failing. And after I met her, I left that. I was like, I need to start a social account where one day I can influence people to say, and I could go to a struggling restaurant and say, everybody come here, and get people to show up. And I think that part of it still is in effect to a certain extent, even if it's not going to get a shit ton of views.
Yeah.
There was a restaurant earlier this year. I went to go get lunch. And as I was walking up to the counter to order, the owner was like, I was wondering when you were going to come and make a video. And I was like, fuck. I just wanted to come get lunch.
Yeah.
I didn't want to make a video.
Yeah.
I don't have everything to make a great video.
Yeah.
And it wound up being, I was just like, whatever. I'm just I don't want to disappoint her.
Yeah.
And so I just made a quick video like, hey, I'm here at this restaurant. I'm eating this. It's really good. She has... there's not many soul food places in Syracuse, like 2 or 3 that I know of, and her stuff's on point, Miss Prissy's. But so I just put out this video. It was not a good video.
Yeah.
It wasn't like the biggest video we'd ever done by like in terms of like views. But like 3 weeks later, she came in for a podcast and she said, I sold 6 cases of chicken wings like the next day after you posted that video talking about the chicken wings. People were coming in for it. I was like, damn, that's awesome. You know?
It's 100% like social media. Like as far as my business goes, it 100% translates to sales in some way, shape, or form. I mean, it's a free tool for a business owner to utilize to get their product and their concept out there. But like, just like you did for Miss Prissy, is that?
Yeah, Miss Prissy's.
Yeah. So you came by, you had the 4 different styles of pizza.
Oh, yeah.
And then you shared a Detroit style video 2 days later, or somewhere around there.
Yeah.
And that entire weekend, we were just funneling calls like people wanting Detroit style pizza. And we're just saying, hey, we do that on Wednesdays only. Wednesdays only. And then this most recent one where you did that that snippet. I mean, people traveling from an hour and a half because they saw that little thing about you saying that it was some of the best pizza you've had, or was the best pizza you've had in your life.
Yeah.
And again, like something like that is super beneficial for a small business because now you've reached this, you have allowed your platform to translate to sales for that small business.
Yeah.
So it's awesome. I mean, word of mouth is great, but like when you see like a clip go viral and it literally has affected your sales in a positive way, like immediately, it's like awesome. But then when you're in it, you're like, God damn it.
Yeah, I did it. No, it's very cool to still see that.
Yeah.
The point I was making with like training and stuff is like social media, all the YouTubers I follow and experts and consultants is a lot of them say different things. Some say like even I get if there was 4 YouTubers with good followings that were social media experts and they all posted a video today, they would say 4 different things. One would say hashtags still matter. One would say hashtags don't matter. One might say reels are still the way to go. Another one might say reels are dead. But the one thing that I've been seeing over the last like 4 weeks from a lot of these educators is they're saying one of the best ways to grow your business, no matter what it is to message the people that are consistently engaging with your content, which is like the old school. I mean, that's what social media was. It was never meant to be like monopolized by businesses trying to get you to come in for their Tuesday cheeseburger special. And so it's really interesting to like these huge creators who have always been like, hey, here's the hashtag hack. And here's the time that you should post hack to get this many views and
Which
use
is all
this
bullshit.
hook. Right. Yeah. But they're all saying like, hey, if you want to grow your business, go through your content, find the people that follow your stuff and like your stuff a lot, and go message them and start talking to them and get them in. And that's kind of like, that's like an old school approach. And that's kind of what your your loyalty program.
Yeah.
That was a long way to get back to your loyalty program. But
we got there though.
we got there. So tell me about it. So they pay, so if I'm the top tier, if I'm the gold level,
Yeah.
and I get 30% off an order, what does that cost me?
So it's $150 for that membership.
That's it?
$150 for 30% off. Yeah.
Wow.
But
For a year?
Yeah, for one full year.
Wow.
And in order for you to recoup that $150 in savings, you have to spend $500. And everything after $500 will start eating away at that profit.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, it's again, it seems like a lot off the top.
Yeah.
Which again, I price it out to that because it makes sense for me.
Yeah.
But all in all, like it could be different for every other business.
So does it go 50, 100, and 150?
I actually I think it's I'm sorry I think it's 75, 125, and 175.
Okay.
Is what it
Still,
is.
yeah.
Yeah, but basically the same
Right.
like ratio. But yeah, that membership fee comes right to me right up front, and then I don't essentially start losing that profit until
Right.
or I'm not as profitable until they eclipse that $500 spent.
Yeah.
There's some people that just barely
Yeah.
break 500, but there's some people that spend $2,500, you know, in a calendar year. But now they have that membership and they're utilizing it. And instead of them ordering once a month,
Yeah.
it might be twice a month. It might be 4 times. So all in all, like the frequency now has
Yeah.
gone up.
Right.
Because instead of going to Salvatore's or Mark's or whatever it may be,
Yeah.
well, we get 30% off. It's going to bring it somewhat closer to that price point of those other restaurants. So like in terms of like dollar amount, I'm still recovering those sales because
Right.
of frequency. So I think it made a lot of sense for me, and it's been working for these 2 years. And
Yeah.
you know, people are asking if they were going to come back after the year, and we brought them back.
That's
And
great.
people are buying. So
Yeah. I mean, they say in, you know, the average consumer has space for like 6 brands in their life. Like they really don't change those brands up too often. And obviously, like, listen, there's more than 6 companies that you might buy from. But in terms of like your loyalty to those brands, I think that's one of the reasons why new restaurants, especially in our area, have such a hard time. Like the trajectory of a restaurant, if you open a restaurant today in Syracuse, if you did a good job of your social media leading up to your opening, you can be busy when you first open, like the first couple weeks. And then for us, once our newspaper, Syracuse.com, once their food writer, Charlie Miller, great guy, once he covers new restaurant openings, once that happens and that gets about 20 to 40,000 hits on the website, you'll shoot through the roof and skyrocket. And the way I explain it to like new owners, it's if you suck at what you do, your service sucks, your food sucks, it takes too long to get the food to customers, you'll be really busy from that article for like anywhere from like 1 to 3 weeks, and then you plummet. If you're great at what you do and you're exceptional, best food, best service, timing, all that, you'll be really busy from that article for like 3 months, and then you plummet. And then it's just a waiting game.
Yeah.
You have to sit around and wait, you know, to grow and mature and people to remember you and, you know, to really be able to get back that repeat business. And I think that's why it's really important. Like, you know, I guess I would equate somebody who has like a loyalty program, like a 10 punch and you get a free sandwich is like the equivalent of like, I'm just going to make my post for today and hope it works. And then your program of like, pay $175 for the year and get 30% off is more of the like, hey, I'm going to take time and DM these 10 people. You know?
And that's what I did. So I'm a big data guy.
Okay.
I like data.
Yeah,
and,
same here.
Looking at those numbers, and I saw that there was customers that were essentially like, you know, 30 orders a year, which equates to, you know, at least once a month, right?
Right.
You know, a little more than that.
Yeah,
There's some
twice.
that were like 60
Wow.
orders a year, and then looking at the dollar amount and like reaching out to like at least the, you know, people who are spending $500 or more, like, hey, just so you know, we have this membership program, basically going cold sales,
Yeah.
you know, and a lot of people are like, thank you so much for bringing it to our attention. And majority of the time, they ended up purchasing that membership.
That's awesome.
So all in all, it was super beneficial to me to launch that. And like you said, like we've had a lot of publicity from news outlets, from, you know, doing live segments at the restaurant with the food truck too. The DNC writer Tracy Schumacher has wrote a couple articles about us. We've got a lot of publicity from news outlets, which is great.
Yeah.
And then if you're able to get that in addition to having a quality social media,
Yeah.
it's win-win. I mean,
Right.
both ways are going to translate to sales, but
Yeah.
the biggest thing is like making sure you're able to accommodate
Right.
that volume of sales. This year alone, you know, we're up like I want to say right now 30% over last year,
Wow.
which is huge,
yeah.
huge growth. But the thing for me was like, why do we have such a big leap this year? And I'm thinking back of like this entire year, and there's been, you know, a few different things that have come up. Like, you know, there was a Washington Post that did pizza. They created this, I don't even know what it is, like an interactive map about pizza in different cities and like where are the best pizzas in these cities. And in New York State, we made it to 2 categories. So Peels on Wheels made it to 2 categories. So the 6th best Detroit style in all of New York.
Wow.
And then I think it was either number 1 or number 2. I think it was number 2, actually. 2nd best Sicilian style pizza in all of New York.
Wow. That's awesome.
So Tracy Schumacher wrote an article about that. And then, like you said, for you know, 4 straight weeks, people wanted Detroit style pizza and Sicilian style pizza. So like my approach to social media was constantly posting those things.
Yeah.
And sharing, you know, an achievement like that. You know, the Washington Post, I mean, that's
Huge.
yeah, and to have been mentioned in that, and then next you know, another person or another, you know, news outlet is talking about that article too, so you gain more traction, and now we're seeing ourselves in this like thing where we're getting a lot of exposure outside of our city, and now we're becoming a destination pizzeria. Like this past week, we had 2 couples from Canada come make a point to come and have our pizza,
That's wild.
which is insane. Someone from another country, granted it's a drive, but still,
Yeah,
just for
for
our
sure.
pizza.
Yeah.
And then like
That's huge.
I had mentioned to you via DMs about 3 couples in one day driving over an hour, you know,
Yeah.
Corning and Hornell it was.
Okay.
And Syracuse to
Yeah.
come have our pizza on a Saturday. Like
Yeah.
it's crazy, crazy, crazy.
Yeah. It's not that, you know, like Syracuse, I don't say it in response to that, but like to anybody listening to the podcast that's from Syracuse, Rochester is not a bad drive. Like when I go out to Buffalo to create content, that's a haul, you know. It's 5 hours of driving.
Yeah.
You really got to have your shit in
Yeah.
order when I go out there, you know, message places ahead of time.
Good thing,
Rochester.
hour 15 drive from Syracuse,
Right.
right?
It's
You know,
not that
it's not
bad.
bad, especially if it's a sunny day, nice afternoon.
Yeah.
Easily do it.
Right.
For some good pizza.
Yeah. When I used to live in Texas, and I lived in Killeen, and Dallas, Fort Worth was like 2.5, 3 hours north. And it was not a big, like, I knew plenty of people that would drive up to Dallas and back on like a Friday or a Saturday just to go to dinner.
That's insane.
Right.
Yeah.
But, you know, out there, the speed limit's like 80 miles an hour on the highways, and
So really more
everything's,
like 90, 95.
everything's flat and
Yeah.
straight. So, you know, the drive wasn't as bad. But yeah, it's, you know, so the drive out to Rochester to experience what I would consider a worlds beyond Syracuse food scene is not that big of a deal.
It's cool. It's definitely, there's a lot of different restaurants to choose from. But I'm just starting to get familiar with the different chefs and actually get acquainted with a lot of chefs in the community.
Okay.
I've just been so focused on my own craft and honing in and figuring out how to operate a business at the end of the day. So a
Yeah.
lot of my time's been dedicated to that. But now that I'm a part of this restaurant scene, I think it's important as a restaurant owner to help support and raise awareness for the other restaurants in the community.
Yeah.
So I think, not only that, but it also helps your creativity too. And to build those relationships and network with some of those chefs to potentially collaborate and things like that. It's really cool to be a part of. So
Yeah, for sure. All right, so now I've got some selfish dough questions before I let you get out of here.
no, it's all good.
All right, I always confuse graham and Sicilian. Which one's the thinner square?
So, all right. Sicilian style pizza, traditionally, it's dough that's proofed in a pan. So it leads to a thicker, airier crust.
Okay,
Most people par bake it to lock in that thickness.
gotcha.
So if you don't par bake it, you can still make a Sicilian without par baked dough. You're just not going to have nearly as much of a spring. So like
Yeah.
for me at my restaurant, I let them things proof, so they're like 2 inches in height, and then I par bake it to lock in that thickness and that crumb structure.
You don't put any cheese on it at that point?
Nope,
Okay.
just the dough and olive oil itself. Par
Yeah.
bake it for a few minutes to lock in that thickness and consistency. Grandma style pizza, a little less dough than a Sicilian, but it's proofed in a dough box, put in the pan,
Okay.
and stretched to the corners,
Gotcha.
then topped, and then baked.
Okay.
And typically, like, there's two ways to do, like, sauce either one. Like, some people will do dollops of sauce throughout. Like, my Sicilian, it's really just, like, strips, diagonal from corner to corner. We'll do one down the middle and then two flanking the ones in the middle. Whereas, like, the grandma style, a lot of places will do layered mozzarella or sliced mozzarella down first and then spread the sauce throughout.
Okay.
But like typically the doughs are pretty much the same. Like
Yeah.
the recipe themselves is just the approach to baking them. And like if you really want to get down to the nitty and gritty, like traditionally Sicilians in a rectangular pan, grandma styles typically can be in a rectangular pan or square. To each his own.
Yeah.
My version's kind of more of like a Sicilian grandma style hybrid.
Okay.
We actually put sesame seeds down on the base of the pan, then put the dough on top, stretch it to the corners. And then once they're stretched to the corners, we just hold them in the walk-in and then pull them out like a few hours. Like every few hours we're pulling dough, but we pull our grandmas out every couple hours so that they're proofed in the pan technically. But it leads to, it's not quite as thick as the Sicilian style pizza. Kind of falls between like the thickness of a New York and the Sicilian,
Yeah.
if that makes sense.
Yeah, for sure.
But that's my version of it. Now,
Yeah.
you talk to someone who's from New York City where grandma style was created, they'd be like, that's not fucking grandma style pizza. But to me, I mean, the characteristics are very similar, very crispy. It's thinner, has some crumb structure to it. Cheese down first, sauce spread throughout. But it's my version of it.
Yeah.
That's my interpretation of it. And I think so many people get caught up on like, this is authentic,
Right.
this style pizza. Is
Yeah.
it though?
Yeah.
Maybe if you're from Italy
Right.
and there's like regulators, that say, all right, in order to make this style pizza, you got to go to school here to make this style pizza,
Yeah.
that sort of thing. But yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, I've always put my own spin or twist on any of those pizzas.
Yeah. So is that a lower hydration on the grandma style?
No, so I keep essentially it's just different dough weights on the grandma style and the Sicilian style pizza. So my Sicilian style is 900 grams for a 14 by 14 inch pan.
Okay.
So you're talking about 2 pounds of dough.
Wow.
That's again just sits there, gets
Yeah.
about 2 inches in height. It's like super light, airy, fluffy, but also super crispy on the bottom.
Yeah.
Because it's almost like fried in that pan because we coat it with olive oil.
Yeah.
The grandma style, same thing. It leads to a little bit different texture. So like one's baked for like 8 minutes, the Sicilian, because it has that 5-minute par bake. And then the grandma style being like a 15-minute
Okay.
bake because it's going in and baked in from a raw state, if
Yeah.
that makes sense.
Yeah, for
It's
sure.
not, what is it? par baked.
Yeah.
But it's right around like 77% hydration.
Okay.
But like I always tell people, like, don't get too caught up on the hydration.
Yeah.
Figure out the flowers, because like
Oh,
with
okay.
hydration, like there's so many different types of flowers out there. Each one's going to retain water very differently,
I didn't think about
depending
that.
on the protein content and W index.
Yeah.
So like, so for stuff that's like you want to pump more water into, so like your Roman style pizzas, typically a lot of the pan pizzas, higher hydration, you want to use a stronger flour for, because it can absorb and retain more water. That's what's going to lead to those nice big air pockets
Yeah.
with, higher hydration. But like you could have two bread flours that have the same protein content, but like one's W index is like 300 while the other one's like 200. The one that's 200 is not going to be able to get nearly as much water into it as the 300 one. So like getting familiar with flour, understanding what the wheat germ is, understanding protein contents, like all of that was like foreign to me, but I went to school and got certified in a Roman style pizza. And that was when it piqued my interest about the science behind fermentation and understanding flours. And from there, it just turned into an obsession.
Yeah. Yeah. I've been, the recipes, I've followed a few different ones. I know I've seen online that like, real Detroit style from Detroit is a lot breadier, a lot kind of almost like white bread compared to like, artisan bread.
Yeah.
I see a lot of people cut it with scissors and that kind of stuff. And I don't like that. I like your style. Buffalo deep dish pizza, by the way, in Buffalo, if you've never been out there.
Of course.
You've been there?
Yeah.
Fucking amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah, really good.
No. You're saying Buffalo Deep Dish, the guy on social media?
Yeah.
Yeah. So we know one another just from social media.
Okay.
I have not had his pizza yet.
Oh.
His pizza looks awesome.
So good.
Definitely on my radar to go and have his pizza at some point. A lot of great pizza in Buffalo too.
There is. I'm not a huge fan of the Buffalo style though.
Neither am I.
It's
Not
like
for me.
you can't pick it up.
Yeah,
You
it's very heavy, bready, bitter, like not bitter, but like a pasty sauce.
Yeah.
Cup and char pepperoni.
Right.
Baked in a pan typically.
Yeah.
It's like your traditional sheet pizza.
Right. I like the cup and char, and we went out there and did a thing with a restaurant out there, which I'm not going to mention their name just in case they listen to the podcast. But it was one of the few kind of like paid things we did, and so we went out there and they made this whole pie, and we took it out front, and I'm going to like eat it on camera, and I'm like trying to pick this thing up on camera, and you can't.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh, it just needs to cool down, and then I'm like, no, it's just the style,
Yeah.
And so, but anyways, yeah. So Buffalo deep dish, he does a really good job with his stuff.
Yeah. You can tell.
yeah.
Automatically, you can tell, like just from looking at it on social media, the structure, the look of it,
Yeah.
his technique behind it, all that.
Yeah.
I'm really excited about that. But one of the best pizza chefs that I know in all of the U.S. and the pizza industry in the world, from Buffalo, New York.
Oh, really?
Jay's Artisan Pizzeria.
Yeah, I know the name. Yeah.
So they do squares
Yeah.
there, but they have been recognized in the top 100 pizza restaurants in the world the past 5 years now.
Wow.
I want to say they're 13th best Neapolitan. And this is an organization that's based out of Italy.
Okay.
So they have their own rankings for Italy, then they have the world, then they have like US. So 13th best in the US, right out of Buffalo, New York for Neapolitan. And then I want to say they're like 78th in all of the world for Neapolitan.
Wow.
And that's right out of Buffalo. But John Langfelder, when I first started out, he was an inspiration to me, and he actually helped me out a significant amount when I was first getting going. I went in there as a customer, struck up a conversation, told him about what I was doing, and he was more than willing to help me navigate through the industry, talking ingredients and providing insight, knowledge.
That's cool.
Very much a mentor to me. And he is actually in the process. So he actually sold it to one of his employees, moved away out of state for a little bit. Now he's back to Buffalo, took up a job opportunity, and now he's actually opening up a pizza restaurant again.
Oh, nice.
So all in all, one of the best pizza chefs that I've met, one of the greatest people I know.
Yeah.
Just a gem of a human. Him and his partner Amanda are opening up this restaurant called Pizzeria Florian, and I'm so fucking stoked for him.
That's awesome.
But yeah, anytime he comes into the restaurant, he's fucking dissecting my pizza and like he's got such an educated palate from like a pizza's perspective, and like he can call out the ingredients. You know, he like I'll tweak something so minor in a recipe. He's like, this is different from the last time. I'm like, how did you fucking know? You know, how? Like his palate is just so sophisticated from a pizza standpoint, but he knows anything and everything about pizza. But yeah, there's a lot of great pizza in Buffalo, and there's definitely some artisan pizza in Buffalo.
Yeah.
But even in Rochester, New York, there's a pizza renaissance happening. You know, in the last few years, you're talking. You've got Doughboys.
Yeah.
You've got Pizza Wizard.
Yeah.
You have Create a Pizza, Peels on Wheels.
Yeah. It definitely feels like Rochester has that. But the one thing I haven't seen, and people haven't recommended either, is just like your classic pizzerias. Like if I ask for recommendations for pizza, like in New York State, in Buffalo, I'm gonna get all your old school classics, right? And Syracuse, I know, Mario and Salvo's is typically top of the list. Palladino's is there. Pavone's is there. A lot of people will say Twin Trees.
Yeah.
But Rochester, it's always like, not just you newer guys, but it's also different style guys. Like, there might be one that somebody recommended that's like in Victor, I think. Now I'm blanking on the name. But for the most part, in Rochester, it's always like, you, Pizza Wizard, Doughboys, There isn't like you got to go get the New York style at this place because it's amazing in Rochester.
Well, the thing is that's fucking crazy about Rochester. Rent.com did a restaurant analysis, and 20% of the restaurants in Rochester have pizza on the menu. So Rochester fucking loves pizza. And then you got to think about all the different chains that we have.
Yeah.
Mark's, Salvatore's, Cam's, Perry's, Carbone's, Mazzarone's, like all of them at a minimum, a few locations, all the way up to dozens of locations. So like saturated with pizza and burger joints, garbage plates, things like that. So Rochester loves pizza and burgers, and dogs. But in any event, like, there's like seeing that data, there's a market for pizza for everyone. Yeah. And I know that my pizza's not for everyone, and I'm okay with that.
Right.
You're not going to be able to please everyone, unfortunately, because pizza can be consumed so many different ways.
Right.
Thin crust, thick crust, bitter sauce, sweet sauce, extra cheese, light cheese, like so many different ways and textures and all that. So like for me, knowing that 20% of the restaurants offer pizza, that tells me this community fucking loves pizza. Yeah. So it's like, it's cool to see, like, also too, like, we used to be known as a flour city because a lot of the flour that was milled came up and down the Genesee River to the Hudson Valley area. Now it's known as the flour city because of the lilacs, but, early on it was because of mills along the Hudson or along the Genesee in the Hudson Valley region.
Yeah, Penn Yan, there's a world-renowned grain farmer, Klaus Martins. Yeah. And, his wife still runs like the community flour mill. Yeah. Grain mill. And, so I've the next thing, so that with my Detroit at home, I've tried really just bread. I do bread flour, whole wheat flour. I do the malt powder. Yeah. I did try it with 00 and some wheat flour. And so the only thing I substituted was really just the 00 and the wheat, change the water a little bit. I've tried sugar, I've tried no sugar. But all of them I do 2-day cold fermentation. And then, the thing that like is I let it proof in the pan all day long.
Yeah, so man.
When I leave in the morning, put on the oven.
Set it and forget about it.
Right.
And check in on it. Yeah. Like if it was a baby that's napping, you come in, baby's still breathing. Okay, good. Right. But in any event, like with the dough itself, like never rush the proof.
Yeah.
Just let it take its time because, again, so many variables out of our control and temperature,
Yeah.
you know, and how active that yeast is. But yeah, I definitely always recommend to anyone, like, figure out a dough recipe, get familiar with that dough recipe, and then from there, try and tweak the different flours that you're
Yeah.
using. So try one brand, get familiar with it that way, then now start implementing other types of flour into that. But like most Detroit usually is like 11.75 protein content to like 12.5, maybe up to 13% protein content, but it's usually like a high gluten bread flour is typical. But yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, who gives a shit what types of flours you're using, as long as you're happy with that outcome and the texture and the flavor of it at the end of the day.
Right.
And too many people get so caught up on making authentic.
Right. Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Well, listen, man, I don't want to keep you any longer. Thank
hey,
you.
man, this has been fun.
Yeah. Thank you so much for driving out.
No problem.
Coming on the podcast. Everybody
Absolutely.
who's listening or watching, make sure you get out to Rochester and go check out Peels on Wheels, the official Eat Local New York stamp of my favorite pizza in New York.
Hell yeah. Appreciate
Thanks,
it, man.
man.
Appreciate
Appreciate
the
it.
time and what you do for the community.
Yeah. Thanks, man.
No problem.